Hey guys, it's Alyssa here, and today I shall be talking about the best books that I read in 2018. I have 7 books here. I didn't want to make like one of those videos where it's like the best 18 books I read in 2018. I'm not really gonna do these in like most to least favorite books. Like, they're all my favorites. I love them all for different reasons, and let's just get into it. So the first book that I shall be talking about is The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. I read this and I absolutely loved it. I was shocked after I read this to find out I'm apparently in the minority on this and not a lot of people like this book. I loved it. When I read it, I had been so early into thrillers that I don't know if that made me like it more or what have you, but I really loved this. I was completely shocked by the ending of this. Completely blown out of the water. Throughout the entire book, like, obviously I didn't like a lot of the characters or anything like that, and they treated the main character really bad, but I was still interested to see what was going to happen. And thrillers are, I think, such a hard thing to talk about because there are so many and the genre ranges, and a lot of times you're reading about unlikable characters and unlikable people. They're such a highly individual thing, as with most reading it is, but especially with thrillers, I find that I have yet to find somebody who I agree with on a lot of thrillers, because it just really depends on if it struck you as interesting or surprising or if it was predictable or not. This I was shocked by. I have yet to read another Mary Kubica book that I personally think is as good as this one. I recently tried picking up her most recent release and literally guessed the plot within the first, I would say, 20 pages. This I didn't. This was shocking to me. This was a really good read. It kept me engaged, and it was just kind of weird throughout the entire thing, and I really loved it. The next one that I shall be talking about is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This was a book that I had not had on my radar. I had seen everybody talk about it. I saw it cheap for like $1 or something like that, and I was like, hey, it's a super short book, let me just give it a shot. I read the back of it and I was like, oh, that kind of sounds interesting. You know, I don't read much literary fiction, but most of the time I think that they seem too long to me. I feel like I wouldn't be engaged. So I saw this and I was like, ooh, that sounds really good. I picked it up and I was beyond surprised at how much I fell in love with this book. It really hit a personal note with me. It really goes into the inner workings of a Chinese American family and all of what they go through, and basically you find out at the beginning of this book that one of their children goes missing, and you go forwards and backwards and all of that and kind of what led up to this event, and it was truly heartbreaking for me. Still makes me feel some type of way. I am definitely planning on rereading it again. It was very relatable to me and I love this book. I will continue to reread it in the future, and if you're looking for a complicated family dynamic and some heartbreak that goes along with it, and just people being people and making mistakes because they're not perfect, I highly recommend this book. The next book that I shall be talking about is Fire by Kristen Cashore. I read Graceling at the very end of 2017, and I was very excited to pick up the next book in this companion series, and I was beyond not disappointed. I was really impressed. I had really great things to say about Graceling, but just that I had some issues with it. This book was perfection to me. This was one of the best fantasy books I have ever read, ever. I don't know what Kristen Cashore does. I don't know what magic this woman possesses, but she manages to make me feel so much for characters. I like the same way in Graceling, but even more so with the characters in this book. I was just so overcome with feelings for them, which I don't experience often. The romance in this was spectacular. It was so lovely. The writing was much better, I think, in this one than in Graceling. It had a better flow. It kept me more engaged. It didn't feel too long. I felt like everything that happened in this book had to happen, whereas in Graceling I was like, did that really have to happen? This was such a solid YA fantasy book. I loved every second of it. I could not put it down. I devoured it. It's definitely in the top books, especially top fantasy books, that I've ever read. Next one that I shall be talking about is Spill Zone by Scott Westerfeld and Alex Povelin. I think that's the illustrator. This is just a really great graphic novel. The artwork is some of the best artwork I have ever seen in my entire life. The coloring on it is so unique, and plot-wise, this was also really interesting, and it did keep me engaged with that. But honestly, I would have just read this just to look at the artwork because it's that cool and interesting and different and unlike anything I've seen before. If you're a person who likes reading graphic novels and does it a lot for the graphic element, I cannot recommend Spill Zone enough. I think it's really different compared to what's on the market, especially for YA graphic novels. The next book that I'll be talking about is The Poet-X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was a book that I read for Bar-a-thon. I had heard wonderful things about it throughout the entire year. Everyone had said like, oh my god, listen to the audiobook, blah 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 blah. I think the physical format stands up just as much. I didn't listen to the audiobook, but the physical format still had me in my feelings. I really related with this on a level I had not anticipated. This really resonated with me. I wasn't expecting that. I had gone into it just expecting a really lovely, book, and I ended up with a book that I really understood on a personal level. It was so good and so powerful, and talk about a wonderful, empowering female main character. Cannot wait to read more from this author. The second to last book that I shall be talking about is Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Now, I did read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom this year. I liked Crooked Kingdom even more than Six of Crows, and I think I'm like a little bit in the minority on that one. I love Six of Crows, don't get me wrong. Six of Crows is one of my favorite books, obviously. I love that series, but I feel like plot-wise, Crooked Kingdom was more interesting. Character-wise, it was more interesting and more heartbreaking. If I were to describe Crooked Kingdom, I would call it scary and terrifying, because emotionally and just mentally dealing with the roller coaster ride of a plot that it is, it really, really did me, and it was a lot. Six of Crows was great, but there was a lot of setup with Six of Crows, which I went into it knowing. I mean, it's a big book, and I just was blown away by Crooked Kingdom. Last book that I shall be talking about, which is actually, I think, the last big book that I read of the year, is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Now, the reason I left this for last is because this was truly the most shocking book that I did not expect to fall in love with. I had tried reading The Cruel Prince when it first came out. I think I got it from Overdrive, and I started it, and it was just really intense. Frankly, if you have not read Cruel Prince, warning, it starts off very intense and very brutal, like just off the bat. It's like very, like you're thrown, like you jump in with 2 feet. So I was like, not in the mood right now. So I kind of like put it off, and I didn't like discard it in the sense of like, I was like, oh, I'm not going to read that. I was just like, oh, maybe it's not for me. I don't know. Maybe it's not the right time. I'll maybe go back to it one day. But I hadn't had it on my radar. I just don't read about fairies, frankly. It's never been my thing. I have never read a like fairy book in its entirety ever. They're not something that I keep on my radar. So when I read this and fell in love with it, I was kind of surprised. The best way to describe this is it brought back all of my teenage feels when I used to read fantasy, because that's what it was for me. It was like I was getting all fangirly and like really excited about it, and while I was reading it I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening, you know? And there's like a very distinct feeling. There's a difference between reading a book you really loved and enjoyed and like it made you feel some type of way, and then there's reading a book that like truly deep down to your core just made you fangirl, and that's what The Cruel Prince ended up being for me. I didn't plan it. I wasn't expecting it. I just really fell in love with it. And I think it's partly because Jude is such an interesting main character. She's not the chosen one. She's not the one with all of these special abilities. She's kind of the oddball, one of the oddballs in her world that she's in. And she's basically constantly told that, like, no, you're not good enough. And she's like, you know what? I'm gonna go and do it anyway. And I'm gonna prove you guys wrong. She's just so kick butt. She's so kick butt and she's so strong. And she just really had me rooting for her. That was my list of the best books I read in 2018. This video is 20 minutes long. I hope I can edit it down to like 10 or something like that. That's all I got. So if you guys read any of these books and have any opinions on them, let me know down below. Also, all of my social media will be down below if you want to follow me and all that fun stuff. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I shall see you in the next one. Bye.